Hi and welcome to our combat overview tutorial, and in this tutorial I will show you the basics of the combat screen, and also it will explain a little bit about the important aspects of combat. And in the next tutorial video we will do some actual fighting. So here we go. Now each combat is fought on a tactical combat map. It's a hex-based map that's also procedurally generated depending on the place the battle took place on the world map. So this is a tundra tile. You can see a little bit of shrubbery and bushes, and you have some small boulders and so on. And you will face off against the enemy factions that you encountered on the world map. So first of all, this terrain is different terrain. It has different movement costs attached to it. So you can, for example, move here and it will cost 2 action points, and for fatigue to traverse. So depending on the terrain, so a swamp may have a very high cost of movement, and the costs of moving across grass or flat ground are rather low. Anyways, also you will have tiles that are blocking movement and blocking line of sight. That is line of fire as well for ranged weapons like bushes and trees. And you also have height levels. So this is a height level of 1. It costs additional action points and fatigue to move onto that. And it will give a lot of combat advantages. So you will be able to hit better in the vicinity, and also the enemies on the low ground will have a harder time hitting you. So making a dash for the high ground and occupying it early is a very viable tactic, and you have to be afraid of enemies that are on the high ground. So let's quickly go through the UI. So on the top left you have a combat log. Here you will see all the rolls when you attack somebody, and then when you miss or hit you can see the chances. Here you can see how many of your brothers are fighting, how many enemies, and which turn it is. Now over here we have a center camera. You can change the level of the camera to look behind height levels, like so. You can turn on and off the trees to have a better view. You can turn on and off the highlights for block tiles. So here you can see that these tiles are blocked. And if you want, you can turn on the hit point bar. So on the top you have the head armor, then the body armor, and then the hit points. This can be quite handy in the heat of battle to see who's injured and who's not. And for example, this guy doesn't have a head armor over here, so a hit to the head will do devastating damage on him. And you can retreat from combat. So if you are in combat and you have very low chances of winning, you can actually use the retreat command to retreat all your brothers in a very quick fashion from battle, and while retreating they have a high chance of avoiding any attacks. Now in the lower part here you have the name of the character and the action points. The action points are used for everything in combat, like moving and using skills, attacking and so on. And we have fatigue. This is the limit of fatigue that a character can accumulate before he cannot do anything. So this starts at 0 and goes up to a maximum given by the character, and is reduced for equipment. So a heavy armor will lead to a lower threshold, and so you can do less things until you are exhausted. Now let's take a quick look at a skill. For example, this skill costs 15 fatigue to use. So fatigue will go up by 15, and if you don't have enough fatigue left for this skill, you cannot use it. Fatigue will get reduced at the beginning of each turn, so if you are out of fatigue, then you just have to wait a little. And down here is the morale. When people are getting killed in combat, it will impact the morale, and some enemies, for example these bandit thugs, can be beaten without killing all of them because they will start fleeing. Now in combat, if your own guys start fleeing, you are going to have a really rough time. The little blue flag you can see here, by the way, means they are on confident morale, giving them bonuses to stats. And when they start wavering, having low morale, they will get reduction to stats. Here you can see the armor points and hit points, and you can access the inventory over here. Let's go back to the skills. Now here is the turn order. So you can see who acts first and who acts second, depending on the character's initiative. And here are the combat skills. So for example, Rabe has a bow. You can use a quick shot that costs only 4 action points. And you can use an aim shot that costs 8 action points but has a highly increased chance to hit. So, and also important are these buttons over here. The end round, where all of your characters automatically end the turn. The wait button, you can use this once for each character, and they will set them to the end of the current turn order. So this is very handy when you want to make the enemy come to you. And the end turn button. This ends the current character's turn, and he will not act again until the end of the combat round. So let's take another look at the combat screen. This is very similar to the roster you already know from the city manager and the character management, except that you don't have access to an inventory. You can access items, but only items that are on the same tile on the floor in combat. So if you kill somebody, you can actually pick up their weapons in combat. Now here you can see all the traits, all the character stats, and of course, most importantly for the combat are the weapons, and we will just quickly glance over this. This is a bow, a two-handed one. Or for a better example, let's pick the crossbow. It's a ranged weapon. Crossbow has 40 durability, so with each attack it loses durability. And sometimes when you fight against very heavily armored enemies, and you're, for example, using a very light weapon like a spear or a sword, that can fall apart quickly. There's a damage range attached to it, 30 to 50 in this case. 50% of the damage ignores armor with this weapon. This is a very high percentage because a crossbow is designed to pierce through armor, and it will do direct damage to the hit points, ignoring armor. Let's take a look at, for example, the spear. That has a direct damage of 25%, which is already a lot less. And the woodcutter's axe, being a heavy axe, also cuts through armor rather well. Now, the next important stat is the effectiveness against armor, and that gives how effective the damage is applied to armor. So the crossbow is not very good at destroying armor, only 60% effective against armor. But, for example, big and heavy weapons that are made to crush armor, like the woodcutter's axe, have 125% effectiveness against armor, and so they will do additional damage against armor. The axe, for example, does a shield damage, so it can destroy shields. And at the very bottom, same for every weapon, you will have the fatigue costs that come with equipping this weapon. So this crossbow costs 6 fatigue, and this very heavy axe will reduce your fatigue by 14. So you don't only have offensive skills, like for the crossbow, the shoot bolt skill, but you will also have defensive skills that are associated with a shield, for example. That is the shield wall. It costs AP and fatigue like all other perks, skills, but will increase your defense for a turn. So in the beginning of the game, it is very important to make use of the shield wall because your characters have very low armor and low hit points and will get taken out very quickly. Now we take the opportunity and have another look at the perks. These perks, most of them will affect your combat abilities. Let's just pick a couple of them to highlight what they're doing. For example, we have the Pathfinder perk. This will reduce the costs for moving across terrain, especially for difficult terrain, so your characters are way faster and less fatigued when traveling through difficult terrain. And then another skill that's quite handy, for example, is the Colossus. That will increase the hit points of a character by 25%. Or if you want, you can pick a student perk that increases the experience rate that the character gains experience at. So there will be no immediate benefit, but the character will gain levels faster. Now getting into the depth of this perk system is way too much for this video, but you can find guides and build suggestions online, and there's a lot of possibilities within this. So let's head back to the to the combat. And that's all for the overview. And in the next video, we will do some actual fighting.